Thank you very much, and thank you, Philippe, and thank you, Catherine. And I certainly feel very honored and humbled to be with you on this special day and to receive this honor. I've also noticed that Neil Ryder is the most popular professor, probably because he only gives straight A's, or is it because he is tough on the subject matter? You have to explain that to me afterwards. Very good to see the Kofi Annan scholars as well, because just coming back from a 10-day trip to Africa, we definitely need to build the talent bench strength there and build the capabilities. That's a continent that certainly deserves better than what it's getting today, but a lot of that heavy lifting needs to happen with the people from that continent. So I'm very glad that you as a school contribute to that. I would be remiss not to start with first congratulating all of you who graduate today for this wonderful achievement from this wonderful school. If you go to a university like this that has entrepreneurship or sustainability, responsibility, so much ingrained in all what is being taught, I think you're ahead of the pack. It's not just about the degree you get or the grades you get, it's about the totality of your education you get to think about the world's problems. But I would be remiss to say that you might celebrate yourselves here and be congratulated yourself, but this is actually not your day alone. I think you should take just a moment to look around you and to recognize all of those who helped make it possible. You're here with your friends, your families, and your wonderful teachers. They are the ones that got you here, so a little applause for them is probably in place. In fact, what they've done is something I would simply ask you to do. They've put the interest of you succeeding, you getting a head start in life versus many others, they've put that ahead of their own. They could have saved the money, they could have sent you to another school. They didn't have to be here today, but it was important to them that you succeeded. They put the interest of the common good ahead of their own interest, which I think is one of the main challenges and issues that we need to address in society at large. By graduating today, you belong to an elite group of people. In fact, in China, less than 5% of people graduate. In many places around the world, it's less than 2%. Many people don't have the chances that you just take for granted. Many of them don't have the quality of life that you have become accustomed to. And I think the main responsibility that you have, if you belong to that small elite group that you do, is that you put yourself to the service of others, just like your teachers did, just like your parents did, just like your friends did, to make you celebrate this special day today. And I think that would be my first message. So you have great opportunities ahead of you, and you're undoubtedly starting to think about how you will spend your time moving forward. An enormous opportunity, an enormous liberty to do what you want to do. It was Viktor Frankl in his book Search for Meaning who said, when they built the Statue of Liberty on the east coast of the United States, they forgot to build the Statue of Responsibility on the west coast of the United States. You, with your education, understand very well that on the one hand, your entrepreneurship, as you call it, or your liberty does go together with responsibility. So use it, and use it well. The thing that Catherine sent me very briefly was some of the questions that you wanted to have answered. And to be honest, I looked at these questions when I came up here and thought, shall I answer all of these? But frankly, they all need about an hour's response. But I was very pleased to see these questions because it shows the quality of education that you got. How do we avoid overconsumption in the West? How do we make sustainability a part of every corporate culture? Is there any hope for industries, competing industries, coming together to solve some of these more important issues like poor nutrition? Or how do we get traction for sustainable living amongst consumers? Do they really care? Can industry form coalitions to push the world forward on issues like the Millennium Development Goals, and so on and so on? The good news is the questions are right. The bad news is I don't have the time to answer them all. Indeed, in the few minutes that I have available, I'll just focus on a few things that I wanted to share with you that hopefully touch on some of the issues. The good news is that in many areas, at least that I'm working on, and you saw some of the discussion happening in the panel today, things are starting to happen. Businesses are changing. Industries are coming together to tackle the bigger issues. And consumers are demanding increasingly more sustainable issues and more sustainable options. And the issues like the Millennium Development Goals or whatever will replace them in 2015 are higher and higher on the agenda of more and more governments. But the question is not, are they happening? The question really is, what is happening? Is that enough? And the answer clearly is no, to me at least. Because although we've made a lot of progress, although a lot of these things are happening, we're still living in a world that we frankly should not accept. Undoubtedly, we can be proud of the enormous number of people that we've lifted out of poverty. The last 30 years, 500 million people have been lifted out of poverty, China being a major driver of that, but also many other countries. In fact, the original Millennium Development Goal of halving the number of people living in poverty has been achieved. But yet, we talked on the panel about the free market and letting it rule. We still live in a world where over 800 million people go to bed hungry, not knowing if they wake up the next day. We still live in a world where 2.6 billion people don't have access to basic hygiene, drinking water, or sanitation. We still live in a world where 1.5 billion people are totally excluded from the economic process, where 200 million people are unemployed, increasingly so, and yet we need to create 40 million jobs a year. We still live in a world where 85 of the richest people, 85, by the way, you can load up in a double-decker in London, where I spend most of my time, where 85 of the world's richest people have the same combined wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion people. We still live in a world where in many places in the world, and certainly in sub-Sahara Africa, where I just came from, 1 in 5 children doesn't make it past the age of 5. You're not going to bed hungry. You're past the age of 5. You have basic sanitation and hygiene. And most likely coming out of BSL, you have a job. So what do you have to do? Put yourself to the service of the others. In fact, it's in your own self-interest. Any system where too many people feel that they're not benefiting or that they feel that they're being excluded from will ultimately be rejected. We all knew the initial movement of Occupy Wall Street. Then we saw the Arab Spring. We saw people going in the streets in Turkey, Brazil, and many other places in the world. Any system, like a cancer in your body, where too many people feel they're not participating, will ultimately be rejected. This world is being stressed at the moment. There are more geopolitical conflicts than probably in any time in history that you can remember. Governments, designed at the time of Bretton Woods, increasingly turn inwards. In fact, you saw the recent Scottish vote or calls for independence in many places. Agreements, global agreements like climate change or trade agreements, the Rio +20s, are very difficult to come by. When you put 190 governments in the room, increasingly focused on the short-term election cycle. That's why it's time, and I think a decade that we will see ahead of us, where business needs to step up and others need to step up, as you heard in the panel that we were talking about. It's a shared responsibility. At Unilever, the company I represent, we simply created what we call the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. How can we grow and double our business in a world with ample opportunity, by the way? There still are over 2 billion people that have to come into this world as the world moves to 9 billion plus people. There are still many people that can be lifted out of poverty, especially in these emerging markets where there is ample growth. So we can double our business easily over a certain time period. But how can we do that whilst totally decoupling it from environmental impact? How can we use the size and scale of a company like ours, which is in 190 countries and touches 2 billion consumers a day? How can we use the size and scale to galvanize impact well beyond ourselves? We focus on some of the bigger issues related to our business model. Being in the food business, the issue of nutrition. Since half of the world's deforestation, which is about 12% of global warming, is caused by the demand for food, you also have to take responsibility in finding solutions for climate change, for illegal deforestation? And how can we make it a more equitable world by providing livelihoods for many? I just came from Africa again. As I mentioned before, the needs are tremendous, but the opportunities are there as well. It is amazing that the private sector jumps up earlier with solutions to the Ebola crisis than we see the global institutions. It took till last week to get a meager, may I say meager, 300 million from the World Bank and other financial institutions to solve what probably is going to be a very difficult issue to handle because we've waited so long. The issues of climate change, you see companies rising to the challenge because they see the costs coming into their business models, and we now need to galvanize, obviously, the governments into increasingly more action. We've talked about the role of NGOs, the role of business, the role of governments to solve all these issues. I'm very happy to actually leave tomorrow morning for New York, where we have the UN Climate Summit, where you have coalitions like the World Business Council for Sustainable Consumption, located here in Switzerland, the B Team, the Clinton Global Initiative, the UN Global Compact, and many others, talking for meaningful agreements on climate change in 2015, as well as on the Millennium Development Goals. But obviously it needs more than going there and calling for things. There are enough rallying cries. I always say the world is long on words, but short of action. And what it really boils down to at the end is all of us individually. We all are leaders. My definition of leadership is very simple. It is anybody who positively influences someone else. You've already shown to possess that capability. You've shown to be leaders. More than ever, we need the young to step up and be part of the future that we want. The world outside of Europe and the US in 30 years' time is going to be 80% of the world population, if we like it or not. In that part of the world, which we conveniently call still the developing world, half the population is below 25 years old currently. Half the population below 25 years old. Everybody understands in that age group that they might be half today, but that they're 100 tomorrow. And they do care. When we created the Reach Out efforts behind the Millennium Development Goals, we created a simple website called The World We Want. We got over 1 million responses in a very short period of time. Amazingly, by the way, a disproportionate amount from Africa itself. The young people, wherever I go, and I'm very pleased that Kate is here to be recognized as well as an initiator of One Young World. The young people everywhere we go are asking for changes and want to be part of that. And we should be sure that they're included at the table. Which skills do we want? People comfortable working together in partnership. People comfortable working together in full transparency. People with an authenticity and humility that is absent in many of the discussions. People that take a long-term perspective. These issues cannot be solved in the short term. People that are passionate about caring for others and making this a better world for all. In other words, a high level of awareness, a high level of engagement, a high level of humanity, and a high level of humility. I think you possess those skills and you are ready to go into the world. You've posed to me the right questions. I apologize for not asking them all. But I also believe that you are of the generation that can also develop the right answers to your questions. In fact, it was Jonathan Swift who said that vision is the art of seeing what is invisible to others. Have the vision, but above all, also have the courage to change what has been invisible for too many, too long. The need, simply the need for a fairer, more equitable, and a more sustainable world. What lies behind us, or some of the challenges that lie ahead of us, are actually trivial matters compared to the potential that is within us. Unlock that potential and be what you can be and make this a better world for all. Thank you very much.